On behalf of the Southeast Volusia Chamber of Commerce, I want to welcome everyone to this third annual Economic Summit for Southeast Volusia. On behalf of the board and the staff, my name is Bob Williams. I serve on the board. I'm also co-chair of the Economic Development Committee, and we want to thank you and commend you for taking this time today to work on a regional collaborative here in Southeast Volusia. And one of the things that I want to encourage everyone, today we're thinking regionally. I know we've got people who represent specific cities, represent unincorporated county areas, but right now we're talking about how to come together to collaborate. And I want to also emphasize that from a Chamber of Commerce perspective, a lot of people think of a Chamber of Commerce and they think about networking and getting to know other business people. What I want to remind you of is that every day your Chamber of Commerce is working to advocate for the quality of life for everyone in our region. Understand that the business owners in Southeast Volusia, we're residents too. And so the quality of life in a vibrant community is directly tied to having a vibrant business community. And so we're going to be talking about that today with the theme of how do we bring high-paying jobs to this area to help support the quality of life for all of us. Before we get started, I would like to recognize that today is Flag Day. Today is a day that we recognize the establishment of the Stars and Stripes for this great country of the United States of America. So would you be so kind as to join me in standing as we say together the Pledge of Allegiance of the United States. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. Well, one daunting task that I have today is to recognize some people, and quite frankly, I wish we had the time to go around the room and recognize every one of you. There's nobody in this room that's not important. But kind of as the way we do things, I do want to make sure that we recognize our elected officials and many of the people. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go by city, and I'll introduce everybody who's here. If you would stand, and then we'll recognize you at the end. So from New Smyrna Beach, Mayor Fred Cleveland, Commissioner Valley Perrine, Commissioner Lisa Martin, Commissioner Randy Hartman, Kelly McQuillan, City Clerk, City Manager Khalid Rashadat, and Chris Edwards. Could you all stand, and would everybody give them a round of applause, please? Thank you. From Edgewater, we have Mayor Diesel Depew, Councilwoman Charlotte Gillis, Councilwoman Gigi Bennington, Councilwoman Debbie Dalbo, Councilman Jonah Powers, City Manager Glenn Irby, and Economic Development Director Samantha Bergeron. Would you all stand, and can we give you a round of applause? Thank you. And from Oak Hill, we have Vice Mayor Bill Lindlau and Commissioner Linda Hyatt. Would you stand, please? Thank you. And from Volusia County, we have Councilman Danny Robbins, Councilman Matt Reinhardt, Council Chair at Large Jake Johansson, County Manager George Rechtenwald, Brad Harris from Economic Development and his associate Heather, and Michael Ulrich from Water Resources. Could you all stand and be recognized, please? Do we have anyone here from New Smyrna Utilities? Are there any other elected officials that I missed? Well, there's one person that I want to recognize without which this event could not have happened. Someone who really is a model community citizen and servant, a multi-generation first responder. Many of you may know him as the former city manager of Edgewater, but someone whom I'm really proud to call my good friend, and that's Tracy Barlow. Tracy, would you stand, please, and be recognized? Had to go all the way to the back, didn't you? Okay. Okay, now I would like to have, we've had some tremendous sponsors, and we couldn't have done this without our sponsors. And I was wondering, Sans Lassiter, would you be willing to say a few words?
Thank you. He's taller than he looks. Good morning. I'm Sans Lassiter, president and founder of LTG. We're a transportation engineering and planning firm with offices in Ormond Beach, Melbourne, and Jacksonville. Proud to be here and joined by these distinguished organizations today as a sponsor of what I consider to be a very important summit and organization in southeastern Volusia. I'm equally proud that LTG has played a role in planning the road networks that serve southeast Volusia, including the extension, and it's a role we played with a team, but extension of Williamson eventually through the New Smyrna Beach Utility Commission's property, through what's going to be the Innovation Park for New Smyrna Beach, and down into Edgewater into Deering Park. And at that, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak and to be here today. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Sans. And I do want to recognize, is anyone here from Team Volusia today? Team Volusia is our countywide economic development entity, along with the Volusia County Department of Economic Development. And so they've been very key in putting this together as well. We're very fortunate to have a great hospital here in our region, and I want to thank Advent Health for the sponsorship. And so Dr. Dennis Hernandez, CEO of Advent New Smyrna, if you would say a few words, please.
Hey, Dennis.
Good morning. It's great to be here and see actually so many familiar faces. As you mentioned, I'm Dennis Hernandez. I'm the president and CEO of Advent Health in New Smyrna Beach. And I want to first thank the Southeast Volusia Chamber of Commerce, obviously, for allowing us the opportunity to speak. Want to start by saying that Advent Health is very proud of teaming up with the Southeast Volusia Chamber of Commerce and supporting their mission of bringing the business community together and working towards common goals. We know that our local businesses obviously play a huge part in making our region thrive, and that's why Advent Health is committed to working alongside our economic development partners to focus really on how we can better serve our community and promote growth. And Advent Health's mission actually extends beyond the hospital walls. We are committed to working on improving health outcomes for all. And we're very proud to partner with local organizations, including the Southeast Volusia Chamber, to achieve these goals. And some of the work that we're doing to improve health outcomes, for example, is our partnership with the Volusia County Schools. We are the official healthcare champion for the county schools, and Advent Health is focused on three key issues affecting our students. Number one is student-athlete health. Number two is actually strategies to combat chronic absenteeism. And number three then is initiatives to help healthcare career development. And as part of our commitment, one of the things that we do is, and we do this on a regular basis, provide free sports physicals for our student athletes. Our most recent event, we actually provided over 1,500 sports physicals to our students in order to ensure that they can play safely and avoid injuries. And at the collegiate level, we partner with local universities, Daytona State College, the Stetson University, Bethune-Cookman University, to support students that are pursuing careers in the healthcare industry. So we believe that working together, we build healthier, more resilient communities. And, while at the same time we develop a pipeline of future healthcare professionals, such as nurses, physicians, other clinical staff, so that our community can have the best possible care. And some of the partners that we work with, and this is not an exhaustive list, but it's includes the Volusia Recovery Alliance, SMA Healthcare, Jesus Clinic, Early Learning Coalition of Flagler and Volusia, and Boys and Girls Clubs of Volusia Flagler. And there are many others, Marine Discovery Center, the Atlantic Center for the Arts, and so forth, that we do a lot of work with. As our community grows, so does the need also for additional healthcare providers, for additional service lines or enhancement to service lines in the healthcare aspect. And we have been doing this for a number of years, but I just want to give you what, at least in the near future, it's coming to our facility. On July 1st, we're adding an additional interventional cardiologist to our team. In this August, we're bringing in an additional orthopedic surgeon, another general surgeon, and we are, over the next 12 months, recruiting for yet one more interventional cardiologist, one or two more orthopedic surgeons, another general surgeon, and 2 gastroenterologists. So we need to keep up with the demand, obviously, and bringing in an even higher quality of providers to our area. So we're very excited about that. One of the areas that is projected, unfortunately, to grow at double-digit rates over the next number of years is that in the oncology space. The cancer rates are going to be very high. And as you know, we have had a very good working partnership relation with Halifax over many years in providing the oncology services here at New Smyrna Beach. We have made a decision, a mutually agreed decision, that we're going to pivot from that strategy, and we are terminating our agreement effective November 1st of this year. Our strategy and our goal is to bring an in-house program, meaning we are employing clinicians to partner with our Ivan Health Cancer Institute, which is U.S. News and World Report recognized, and whose medical director is actually recognized as one of the top 10 lung cancer specialists in the nation. And I'm very happy to say that we already have hired our radiation oncologist physician, our medical director for the medical oncology program, and we're finalizing interviews so that by November 1st we have the full complement of providers so that we can seamlessly transition our oncology services to this employee model and really not impact any of our patients. So very excited. This is going to allow us to really not only continue the good work that we have been doing in partnership with Halifax, but be able to further enhance and add other services in that area. The other thing, and kind of to finish here, is that the question on everybody's mind always, whenever I go anywhere, is what's happening to that new property on I-95 and 44? And Glenn always asks the question almost on a weekly basis. I do want to say first and foremost, Advent Health is here to stay for the long haul, okay? Obviously, COVID has impacted us all, but there's been a lot of behind-the-scenes work that has been done with consultants focusing on expanding our services into that property. And I hope that in the very near future, I can share with you our timing and phasing of new assets coming to that new property. So in closing, we are extremely proud and honored to be your healthcare partner. We are excited about what the future holds for this community and for this region. And I want to thank again the Chamber for the opportunity to be part of this morning's event, and look forward to working together again, to continue helping this community, this region, be even a healthier, more vibrant, more prosperous area. And with that, thank you, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Dr. Hernandez, for all that good information and also your sponsorship for this event. I also, on behalf of Dr. Kent Sharples, who the CEO Business Alliance is our presenting sponsor. Unfortunately, Dr. Sharples had a medical issue in his family that called him away this morning, but he asked me to extend to you his welcome and his appreciation for all the good work that's going on. The CEO Business Alliance is a group of leaders in our community that have come together to support Team Volusia and all of our economic development initiatives, and we're very blessed to have them in our community and really appreciate their presenting sponsorship. So, I think that is all of the introductory things I was supposed to do. Tracy or Kelly, was there anything else I needed to do? If not, we're going to roll into our first really review of what's been accomplished and the summit objectives. So if you want to pull up that presentation. We'll start out, the first slide really is just kind of going over the agenda, which you all have in front of you. We've done the welcome and introductions and the word from our sponsors. Today, the expectation is that I'm going to catch you up to speed. Some of you will have heard about the regional economic development strategy that we've been working on for many years. Some of you are new, so I'm going to go through it very quickly. You might want to put your seatbelts on because it's going to go fast. But I will say that I have been around, or others have been around, to your commissions and councils to go in more in depth. We're always welcome to do that. We also want everyone to participate in this process. But then we're going to have a very packed agenda. It's going to be a little challenging to keep everybody on schedule, but we're going to hear legislative updates. We're going to look at how we compare to other areas. And then we're going to get some county project updates from our county manager. Glenn's going to talk to us about Deering Park and the innovation project. But I also want to be very clear, this is not just going to be a bunch of presentations. We've got some innovative technology at the end where we are going to ask you to get out your phones, and we are going to ask a series of questions, and we're going to ask for your feedback and your input on the priorities that we should be moving forward with as we go through. So that's the agenda for today. And that's kind of, so in this presentation, we'll review the accomplishments in the Regional Economic Development Strategy and talk about what some of our objectives are, how we're aligned with a number of initiatives in the area, and how we are collaborating regionally. I can't emphasize enough that this has been a very broad partnership dating back many years, and I'm not going to list all of the different entities that have been involved, but this room very much represents how much this is a collaborative effort, a truly regional effort, and we'll hear later on why that is so important. The development process, you see, goes all the way back to 2018 with some of the work with the Southeast Volusia Manufacturing Technology Coalition, and then a whole series of summits and workshops, support by the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council and a grant that they had, as well as leveraging a number of key resources like the Reasonable Assurance Plan for water quality and cleaning up the Indian River, the Mosquito Lagoon, and some of the other economic development plans from the local municipalities. So this slide is really important because in all this work, this is really how it all comes together. We achieved consensus on several common goals. Number one, ensuring value-added, higher-paying jobs for today and future generations. Expanding commercial property tax base to reduce the burden on local residents. Ensuring the wealth and resilience economic future of our communities and improving the quality of life for everyone. And this is a message that we really need to get across. Even those of us in retirement, our quality of life is directly tied to having a vital business community. So we need to keep that message out there. We're working for everyone in what we're doing. So part of how we're approaching this is recognizing Southeast Volusia as a geographic unity and to thereby leverage the unique assets and competitive strength in each city and region. And we want to create jobs, facilitating the creation, expansion, and diversification of targeted, clean business and industries. To do that, it's also going to be important to provide a skilled and quality workforce so that these diversified businesses can be resilient during times of national and global economic ups and downs. And we want to do all of this while protecting the region's valuable natural resources and the region's quality of life. And one of the things that, if you haven't been involved in this process in the past, there are national and state resources that can be brought into the community. But what they look for is they look for a community that they're willing to invest in because that community is working together. And what we're doing today and what this process represents is going to put us in a competitive position to attract those kinds of grants. Now, I want, many of you have seen my notebook over there is the actual regional economic development strategy. It's a comprehensive 34-page plan document. It also includes the narrative in an outline format so that it can be a working document that can evolve over time. It also has project management format in the way of a spreadsheet where our work plan is laid out with specific strategies and detailed actions and time frames. We're tracking the progress, reporting our progress status, and evolving that plan as we go forward. Some of the things that are covered in that document, we profile the demographics, look at our employment, look at what industries we're most competitive in, where there's some targeted economic clusters, what our challenges and opportunities are, and figuring out what goals we want to have and preparing for opportunities, pivoting from threats, addressing weaknesses, and reinforcing our strengths. This plan is organized around 5 key objectives. Regional infrastructure planning is one of the first and foremost areas, but also what we're going to be talking some more about today is how do we position ourselves with zoning and land use in a way that helps us get shovel-ready sites ready to go. Also, what can we do around education and workforce development? How do we collaborate going forward? And at the same time, how do we make sure our community is resilient and able to recover from whether it's economic challenges or storm challenges like we very recently had. I'm pleased to share with you that the work that we have done has been widely recognized. Dr. Sharples, who has been doing this kind of work for decades, believes that the collaboration that we've achieved here in Southeast Volusia is really a model collaboration and unique in our area. Some of the press has pointed out that we are working together and have achieved success. And in fact, we actually won, this plan actually won a national award of excellence. So again, congratulations to everyone involved. At the last meeting, one of the things we did, some of you who were here will remember, we had big maps laying all around the tables, and our working session was brainstorming around where do we want to go next? Where can we identify future land use and zoning for high-paying jobs in our community? And these maps resulted And one of the key areas in a particularly, New Smyrna Beach is particularly built out in many ways with regard to industrial and commercial. And so we identified the western corridor there on the Williamson extension, and we're going to hear more about that this afternoon. One of the things we wanted to point out is what does a successful project look like? And Parktown in Edgewater has been highly successful. You've seen some recent announcements about an 83-acre investment that's being made there. And again, it didn't happen by accident. It happened because leaders got together and laid the groundwork for that. And we're going to talk about what does that mean? What does that look like? But we also have an opportunity, as I said, we're going to talk about the South Williamson Boulevard extension from 44 going down to 442. And I'm not going to dwell on that because you're going to hear more about that this afternoon. Another thing I wanted to point out that's how our community is really coming together. Many of you in this room participated in the Destination Master Plan that the Southeast Volusia Advertising Authority has been working on for several years. That would be Visit New Smyrna Beach is what our Area Visitors Bureau has kind of marketed itself as. And it's too voluminous to go through the whole thing, but I wanted to take a couple of points. When you look at the 5 recommendations in that, 3 of those are related to economic development. And we're really very fortunate that we have a travel and tourism industry that understands the connection and the relationship to the quality of life for all of us here, not just for our guests. They talk about developing districts. They talk about supporting economic development. Then they talk about enhancing transportation and mobility. And we're going to be hearing more about transportation and mobility in the coming months. Many of you know the county is working on updating the beach toll program and possibly adding some off-beach paid parking. New Smyrna Beach has a parking task force underway. And we all know that our quality of life is very much related to the mobility in our area, and that is underscored here in the Destination Master Plan by our Destination Marketing Organization. And furthermore, in supporting the development of districts, they call out developing manufacturing, technology, and aerospace corridors which are ready to go for capital investment to bring high-paying jobs into our region. So I will say that we've made some good progress in terms of taking the next steps. All 3 Southeast Volusia cities have passed resolutions endorsing this regional economic development strategy. The county, I think, is working on doing that as well. The city staff have been directed to continue to work on this collaborative initiative, and we've all committed to engage and align our individual economic development strategies and actions with this regional plan, and to commit to, as we learn things and we have to make revisions, to make this an ongoing process. The Chamber of Commerce, by evidence of all the work we've done to bring you all together here today and the work that we're doing day after day, is very committed to being a facilitator and a convener in this process. And we are going to be talking more about the Williamson corridor. So we had a really good opportunity recently. Volusia County Department of Economic Development in their quarterly briefing brought together 3 panelists who were national, actually global players in commercial development, from site selectors to actual commercial developers. And we had a chance to ask them, what attracts you to an area? And here are some of the points they made. Communities being prepared with zoning and entitlements. And so that's part of what we're going to be talking about, what we've been talking about. Having the infrastructure in place near to where they want to build. And as I mentioned, the Edgewater Parktown is a good model because the infrastructure was brought in there early, and with both roads and water and power and so forth. Electricity. and having it be green and sustainable, and making sure that the power grid is robust in the areas that we have zoned for this. Having the willingness by local government to work with these people who are bringing these high-paying jobs is something they look for, and having an available workforce that has attainable housing nearby is going to be also an item we have to keep on our radar. We asked them, what are the challenges that you face when you come into a community? And so one of the things is, having good attorneys like Glenn Storch and Mark Watts and their team that they can work with to get projects done. Of course, they're dealing with the financial impacts of inflation and rising interest rates like everyone else. There's a little pushback from communities with distribution centers. They felt like we needed to know about that. That does impact our region in the sense, since we are at the nexus of I-4 and I-95, we've seen that there's a market for that. And then raising capital is another area, but they were clear that there's a real need for Class A shallow bay industrial space in our area. So how can we get more competitive? Well, having staff in our local government that are ready to have good relationships with these people, being open and honest in their communication, being able to respond to questions, having fast, flexible timelines, and are motivated and incentivized to help get facilities open fast, because time is money to these people. And one of the things that establishes confidence in a community is having a plan, which is what we have been working on. And so I commend you all for that. And as I said, we're in a very strategic location with I-4 and I-95, not to mention the Cape, just to our south. So what can we do to facilitate high-paying job growth? Well, engaging in this strategic planning, establishing industrial, commercial, future land use, pre-staging the infrastructure is a major incentive, and we'll talk more about that today, as well as doing things in a sustainable way. More and more, 50 years ago, workforce just moved to where the jobs were. Today's workforce wants to go where there's a good quality of life. We live in one of the most naturally beautiful places in the world. All of us want to maintain, preserve, and enhance that, and that can be an integrated part of this process, whether it has to do with water and stormwater and all of those things. And just to remain pro-job growth and with open arms. So I went through that really quickly. Again, on behalf of the Chamber, we're glad to dive deeper on these topics with anyone at any future time, but I want to allow us to get on to the rest of our agenda. And so it is my pleasure at this point. We're very fortunate to have V-Card has stepped up to help sponsor and to facilitate this program. And so I'm going to ask, Jessica, are you coming up? Jessica Gao is going to introduce herself and her team from V-Card and roll into our next item, which are legislative updates. Jessica?
And he is taller than me. So, good morning, everyone. Jessica Gao with Cobb Cole Law Firm. Also the vice chair of the Volusia and Flagler County Association for Responsible Development. And so, as V-Card, we're happy to sponsor with the Southeast Volusia Chamber. To bring this summit forward, you're going to hear from me and Mark Watts in our office a lot this morning on different topics, including a legislative update, incentivizing development in our areas, and how Southeast Volusia compares. Before that, I want to give you a little bit of background for those who may be a little bit unfamiliar with what V-Card does and what our kind of role in assisting with this development may be. So Mark, do you want to join us up here? I like to summon him. He is the president of our firm, so he outranks me in every possible way.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being out here. I'm Mark Watts. I'm a land use attorney with Cobb Cole, currently the managing partner of the firm. And it's just good to see a bunch of people out and engaged in this process. Bob, impressive summary of what's gone on over the past 3 years. I know that, Colin, I think we've had some conversations about some of the things that are going on with this group and this effort. Really, really excited to be here and to see it. So you want me to talk about history? You going into history?
We will go into history, and that will be you. You've been around longer than I have.
That's true.
So generally, VCARD, we see ourselves as an educational branch, an organization. It's made up of a lot of local governments. I believe you are all members, industry professionals, development professionals, and our role is kind of a nonpartisan, non-advocate level. We want to educate on the topics, and so bringing technical expertise to the table to help review in ordinance changes, land use planning, anything that we can provide input on. We have a very strong relationship with the county where they share their draft updates to their comprehensive plans with us so that we can just provide any comments ahead of schedule to help with the planning efforts. And we're happy to do that with any local government. Oh, this is a click-through. This is very fun. So you can see little pictures of our members, attorneys, engineers, surveyors, transportation consultants, home builders, financial institutions. All of those kind of work together to comprise VCARD. And I believe this is kind of our history. So I'm going to click through all of it. And Mark, if you want to give a little update on how we came to be.
Sure. So, as Jessica said, our primary role is to educate. And I think part of that is participating. As you can see, this is kind of the history of both population growth and how we regulate and manage growth management in Florida, and how that, the policies and the structure that we have with comprehensive plans and how it all relates together under the original Growth Management Act and now under the Community Planning Act, how that all fits. And early on, as you can see in about 1983, VCARD actually incorporated. And some of the folks that I guess I now qualify as one of the gray-haired people at VCARD, which is scary at times. But, Sam Owens, for those of you who knew Sam or know Sam, Sam was instrumental in beginning this. My dad, Alan Watts, was part of the group that came together and thought, there's a lot of time and energy that can be spent fighting amongst one another, fighting between applicants and the people that are going to be regulated and the regulators, in the context of growth management as we were going through and implementing things like comprehensive planning. So rather than focus that time and energy on fighting and arguing about those things, and we have had fights and arguments and things of that nature, but what we try and do is do it in a very collaborative way. And so our goal as an organization in the context of growth management regulation is to be involved. One of the things that I think most jurisdictions, I think every jurisdiction sitting here at this table today, will, if you're looking at a new ordinance, if you're looking at changing regulations, if you're looking at updating your comprehensive plan, we'll reach out and say, let's get a draft of this to VCARD. We'll put together a committee, we'll go through those things and provide input to say, I see what you're trying to do here, but maybe if you did it this way, it would accomplish that goal and be more efficient from a landowner's perspective or from a development perspective. So that's really what our point and purpose has been. We're here to really try and make it much more of a collaborative approach, be participants with all of our local governments. I think we've been active and involved in virtually, I think since I've been involved with VCARD over 25 years, I think I've worked in every jurisdiction in Volusia County, and most of the ones in Flagler County as well, to reviewing, proposed regulations and providing feedback and input. So we're happy to be here and be part of this this effort this morning, and we thank all of you sitting around the table for continuing to work with us, as we all kind of work to better our community. So.
Fantastic. And the next slide, I think, is just a highlight. Oh, we've got arrows moving, sorry. Is a highlight of some of our events. I will say that this has some outdated photos. You can see that not all of our new county council members are highlighted, so that means that everyone should come out to our VCARD events. Over the years, we have local government icebreakers, where we have the opportunity for local government officials like you to meet with the development professionals that make up our membership and kind of build those connections that Tracy talked about, and making sure that it's a collaborative space for economic development. We also have standing committees on affordable housing, on transportation improvements, resiliency, where we are reviewing how we can do better every day, and we're happy to share what we're finding from other local governments, from other regions of the city or the state, to help out with future planning. And before we jump into legislative updates, I just want to give you a V-Card update, which is that recently we have shifted our executive director role here at V-Card. So Carrie Carl was with us for 5 years or so. She was fantastic to work with. I'm sure most of you knew Carrie. She has taken a new role at Giabi Consulting with Miriam. And we have a new executive director, Kelly, with us today. And so we want to introduce Kelly. Kelly, if you want to say hi in a few words, she will be your point of contact for everything V-Card.
We're about the same height. Hi, everybody. My name is Kelly Cosentino. I'm the new executive director for V-Card, Volusia County Association for Responsible Development. We have a lot of great events, seminars, fundraisers. We have a golf tournament coming up on June 19th, icebreakers, as Jessica said, and we have a couple seminars coming along. And, you know, if you'd like to get on our newsletter, we have a lot of great news that comes out about the community, and if you are interested, I could give you one of my cards and I'll add you onto the newsletter. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to the chamber, and it's nice meeting you all. Thank you.
All right, I think our next section is going into some legislative updates. Mark is going to cover this first one, but the general view of all of these is to kind of give a background on as we plan for how we grow in the community. Of course, we don't get to do it alone, so we get state feedback at times that can make it harder or easier in some instances. And so this year, we just want to give you an update on what the legislator did that may affect how we move forward in planning for these opportunities.
Okay. So I think in total this year there was about 1,800, a little bit more bills that were filed by the legislature. Out of that, about 356 passed. So we dodged a lot of bullets, but you've got about 356 new rules that new laws that we've got to figure out what we need to do and how they affect us. You've probably heard about a lot of them. We're not going to go into any of the ones that deal with culture and things of that nature, but we are going to talk about the ones that affect local government and the development process. So first one I'm going to talk about is Senate Bill 540. You've probably heard about this one. This is the one that now allows prevailing party attorneys' fees in the context of comprehensive plan challenges. So I'll give you my editorial comment on this briefly. I'm also a board member for 1,000 Friends of Florida. We dislike how this affects public participation. As a representative for landowners, I also do see the need, because we have had some landowners that have spent a lot of time fighting lawsuits that really didn't have merit. And so the essence of 540 is that it allows for prevailing party attorney's fees when there's a legal challenge to a comprehensive plan or a plan amendment. So in the context, just to put that in context, I think we have a case that we reviewed down in South Florida where the attorney's fees ended up being well over $500,000 on a comprehensive plan challenge. So it's expected that this will have, a chilling effect on challenges and things of that nature to comprehensive plan amendments. The other thing that this does that I think is interesting, it clarifies that development orders can only be challenged if they materially alter density intensity of the property. So if those of you that are familiar with comprehensive plans, there's a whole range of things that are addressed in there. There's transportation elements, there's environmental preservation elements, there's housing elements. All of those elements can, prior to this bill, be a basis for a challenge to a comprehensive plan. There's a plan, I think, that plan amendment that Deltona adopted a couple years ago that's had a 2-year lawsuit challenging it based on the housing element and the environmental element. So the other point of this bill is it says you can only base that challenge on changes in density and intensity and their consistency with the comprehensive plan. The other one, this is kind of a cleanup at this point. So the Florida college system, our former community colleges, all Daytona State, similar institutions. The university system has long had a lot of autonomy with regard to its planning. If you go to Florida State or University of Florida or any of the other flagship universities, they've had autonomy. That wasn't as clear when it came to our Florida college system. So the other thing that this bill also does is clarifies that with the exception of those things relating to density and intensity, the rest of the planning efforts for the Florida college system are now exempted out. So, Jessica.
The next one is probably the most popular from the session. It's the Live Local Act. I'm sure at this point everyone has heard of it. It is heralded as kind of the biggest move the state has done for affordable housing in so many years. It's got, about $711 million in funding for affordable housing development in the state, which is fantastic. Mostly what we've heard about are the kind of unintended consequences, perhaps, of the other far-reaching elements of the bill. So you've got a quick breakdown on there. It does provide a lot of tax credit and tax exemption opportunities. In the bill itself, we have been dealing with, tax rebates as an incentive, which you'll hear about a little bit later for years here in Volusia County. This bill creates recognized tax exemptions, which adds another tool in our toolbox that we'll talk about later. But the biggest piece is kind of the zoning and land use controls addressed in the bill. And so for 10 years, kind of I think an experimental period, the bill provides that cities and counties have to, on an administrative level, approve affordable housing in any area zoned for commercial or industrial development, with almost no limitations, which is to say that besides the density being the highest allowed under your comprehensive plan in the entire local government, and the height being either 3 stories or the highest within 1 mile, it has to meet your general setbacks and things like that for multifamily, but it can go anywhere. And so that is going to be, a large impact. It also covers mixed use as long as 40% of those units are affordable in the project that qualifies, and as long as 65% of the total square footage of a mixed-use project is residential. Mixed-use projects also qualify under this for the administrative level required approval with no further process. So you can't require a zoning or land use change, a special exception, or anything like that. I think what's interesting here, and we'll tie into how the Southeast Volusia compare slides that we'll go over in terms of planning, is this is the state saying we're going to let affordable housing in these areas. We see a need for it. We've heard from the developers that having workforce housing in the vicinity of a project is important for development and for these projects to move forward. So we're going to allow it, and you're going to have to listen to us. Now that gives local governments the opportunity to say, if affordable housing is going to be allowed in industrial districts, what can we do to change the nexus of mixed-use development in our city? If those are already going to be side by side, do we shift away from the archaic I-2, I-1s and shift to form-based code and talk about compatibility and buffering? If those uses are going to be beside each other, that becomes, I think, a more important concept than where they're located in the city and how they can grow together.
Okay. You'll be hearing, I'm sure, a lot about Live Local over the next several years. So I know that a lot of people have already been dealing with it. So the next bill is Senate Bill 170. And this is one that really, again, is another instance where we're creating more workload for the local governments. So the intent under 170 is anytime a municipality or county is now moving forward with adopting a new ordinance, you have to have an impact statement, a business impact statement. The statute has a long list of criteria that has to be included in what's covered in that analysis. It also allows for the award of attorney's fees, costs, and damages capped at $50,000 if an ordinance is challenged and the court determines that that it was arbitrary or unreasonable in its adoption. So, again, you're creating additional work for local governments and opening up to liability for the actions in adopting some of those ordinances and regulations. Interestingly, it also does allow for sanctions. If the court determines that the actions in challenging an ordinance or any of the actions that were, in that case intended to harass or delay, that's been part of the law for a long time. 57105 actually says you can't use court filings to harass and delay already, but they felt the need to include this here and be very specific with regard to the challenges of ordinances. And the last point is kind of a reactive point. So earlier this year or late last year, there was a 3rd District Court of Appeals case that came out and said you can no longer have a hearing that starts at one hearing and table it and say we're going to pick this back up, at the hearing on such and such a date and such a time without re-advertising. So the court in the 3rd District came in and said, nope, you've got to re-advertise it every time that you're going to have it on your agenda again. So the legislature here kind of addressed that court ruling by saying, no, you don't. you can still continue doing what I think a lot of local governments have done traditionally. So, there you go.
Perfect. All right, and the next one is kind of a more interesting one, but it deals with the impacts that we have been dealing with here locally, of course, from Hurricane Ian and Nicole. And so it's temporary structures and emergencies. I don't have the bill number. It fell off here in formatting. But it permits temporary dwellings to be located on most sites while structures are rehabilitated to become habitable again. And it's a pretty extended period. So that's a conflict that we see with a lot of local governments. Don't allow for temporary trailers or an RV to be parked in kind of a front yard of a home and things like that. And at least for a temporary amount of time, that will be suspended as we get through kind of the rehabilitation process. It also notes that until October 1st, 2024, local governments are not allowed to make development harder as a result of the hurricanes. And so you cannot add additional protections that become more burdensome as a result of the hurricane. And I know as a county and many local governments, we're looking at how flooding is being addressed in our communities, how resiliency is being addressed. And so I think while this time is a perfect place to plan and study these items, I think what the state was trying to do is prevent unintended consequences from kind of snap actions on, let's take a break here, let's pause things and move forward with a plan that makes sense. So that October 1st, 2024 deadline is in there. Of course, as we move forward with the ideas that we're talking about today, incentivizing economic development is in no way paused, but this is another example of the state saying we are going to regulate how you plan for the future in your community, which we just need to balance against what we plan to do. And I think that is our last update, and it is. And so, like Mark said, there were many other bills passed. Those are the ones that we think kind of apply to our day-to-day planning and land use that we are looking at here. The next section, which again is the Mark and Jessica show, is just a quick summary on how Southeast Volusia compares. We're going to do some county-wide numbers, and then the county has helped pull together some data that you have on your table about how Volusia compares to some other counties as well. And so this first chart, and I will say that all of the charts shown in the PowerPoint are from the Property Appraiser's website. They have a fantastic section of their website that is just historical data, and it's updated right now through 2022. So you can go for any year for the final tax rolls, get charts and breakdowns on each municipality, countywide, on how you shake out at the end of the year. And so this is kind of our guiding star. This is the overall general fund numbers to show you the breakdown of the county land. So countywide, we're about 70% residential. You'll see that number pop up a lot today. Residential capacity at about 70%, and then 30% comprising the rest of the land uses is what we see. Industrial countywide is labeled at 2.5%, commercial 15%, and then you've got ag lands and some miscellaneous land uses there. This is the county breakdown of total tax revenue, again, just from the general fund, but we're really using it to look at the taxable value when we compare. And so overall, countywide, we have $48 billion, 48.7 of taxable value. And when we go through and see how the other local governments in the Southeast Volusia compare to that, you see some fun numbers in terms of industry and section. So you can see here, the commercial taxable value is, $7 billion, and residential is up there at 33, which really matches that 70-30 kind of breakdown that we talked about. And then I'm going to pass it off to Mark, and we're going to do New Smyrna as our first one.
Okay, so in the context of the countywide numbers that you just saw, so this is the numbers for New Smyrna. Here you see residential is a bit higher, 83.4%. The commercial and industrial and the others comprise, the remaining balance. So as a whole, New Smyrna tends to trend a little bit more to the residential side. I know that most of y'all are aware of that and wouldn't doubt that. Overall, let's see if I get to the next one. From a taxable value standpoint, the total taxable value within New Smyrna, based on the final numbers, taking into account all the various exemptions and things of that nature, right around $5.6 billion. So again, in the context of $48 billion overall, pretty strong number for a community of the size. All right, let me keep going. All right, who do we have next? Oak Hill. All right, so Oak Hill really is very much in line with the county numbers, the countywide numbers, 71.5 on the residential side, the balance between the remaining uses. Commercial, a bit higher, I think, in Oak Hill. So I thought that was an interesting point. And then industrial also making a pretty strong showing there with regard to Oak Hill. Overall, from a value standpoint, we're at roughly 171,821,000 from a taxable value standpoint for the Oak Hill tax roll. So.
Yeah, and you can see here, of that 122 million residential, industrial, I'm just picking out, is 2.6 million in the commercial, 17.8 million. So you kind of work together to see the whole. We'll see some examples later in the different charts on where, even though we meet that 70-30 breakdown, the value added from both of the industrial and residential sectors are almost equivalent. And so I think one of our goals today is to talk about how we keep that balance of land uses, but give the local governments the benefit of that higher producing taxable value. And we have Edgewater, 68%, again, a little less on the residential than the county average. Industrial, 6.9%, really big in comparison. Commercial, 10%, but when you combine those together, you're still at about that 17-18% of commercial industrial land uses that we've been looking at. In terms of the numbers, we have about 1.4 billion in taxable value, which is fantastic, over $1 billion in residential, 148 million in commercial, and about 102 million in industrial. So you can see that, congratulations, you guys are kind of rocking the industrial development game, and we'll see how that continues to expand. We've put together a little chart of summaries because that was a lot of information in pretty small font. And so we've broken out New Smyrna Beach. I'm sorry, I used your initials to fit in the spreadsheet. Oak Hill and Edgewater, we've totaled it out, and we've compared it to the overall county numbers. So you can see when you look at Southeast Volusia as a whole, you make up 10% of the commercial value in the county, which is fantastic. Important to today, you make up 38% of the industrial value of the county. That shows that Southeast Volusia is kind of an economic engine for industrial development. And I think you are highlighting your location here at the intersections of major roadways and really keeping track of that location. And we want to see how we can build on that success. And then 17% residential for the overall. We've got population cores in other areas of the county that kind of make up that difference. And then the next chart, and I'll note this came from the county. The chart on your table is actually an updated data set. And so we'll run through this shortly, but you guys have printouts of all of this. And so the first one actually on this is different. So I'm going to use the paper because it's easier to follow. And so the first one is just a comparison of future land uses in unincorporated Volusia County, Southeast Volusia, and then some of our other regional sectors, Greater DeLand, or Greater Daytona, DeLand, Ormond, Greater Port Orange. You can see the breakdown of the land uses, which is interesting that it doesn't match the numbers that we just saw. And so your land use allotment in Southeast Volusia for residential is 54.5%. But we just saw that all of you are hovering at about 70% of residential development. And so what that means is you have the capability out there for other development types in your future land use and planning side, but they're not coming online. And so what can we do to make sure that the planning thresholds that you have provided are met and that taxable value and getting developments out of the ground? An interesting example here is the Greater Port Orange, where they have 75% residential. I'm sure most of you have heard people say Port Orange is nearing build out. You can see that that breakdown is almost true. And something that they are looking at very strategically right now is with what they have left, how do they target those higher value industrial and commercial developments to support the residential that they have in their city. So all of that kind of goes into the higher level of planning on how we get our planning numbers to match what is out there in our community. I'm just going to click through these because they don't really match, but the next one is the land use comparison to different counties. So you can see how Volusia overall compares to Brevard, Collier, Lee, and Sarasota. You can see other than Lee County, which is a little intense out there, We are in a general scope, maybe a few percentages off from other counties that are in a similar sizes to us. Again, that commercial industrial could be a little higher, like Sarasota, Brevard areas. The developed land real tax contribution is an interesting chart that I wanted to point out. You can see in Volusia, the numbers there on the chart, it's residential and then commercial and industrial. Well, that's 70% and 30% like we talked about. Those values are very close together in terms of the return on investment that the county is getting on that kind of tax contribution for each site. The next one is on a land use comparison of Volusia cities. And so you can see that kind of overall again on the tax contributions. And then the last one, I believe, is the Florida cities review of Southeast Volusia compared to a few other select cities. Fort Pierce, Clearwater, Largo, Greater Pensacola, which is where I went to college, so fantastic. The slides don't match, so we're just doing the handout because they were updated. And then Vero Beach. And so you can see, again, pretty close in terms of the breakdown. I'm lagging a little behind in areas like Fort Pierce on industrial development, and so it's how, you know, do we as Southeast Volusia move forward and kind of get those numbers to where we are the example others want to follow in terms of economic development, balance of land uses, compatibility, and being the best place to live. And so if you have questions on these charts later, I know that County Economic Development is here, and I'm sure they're happy to dive in with you, and we're happy to talk about it as well, but that's just kind of a primer on how we compare. For this next part, we're going to talk about incentivizing economic development, local approaches that we've seen work in the area. Mark Watts is going to cover this, and we're going to have Chris Rowley with Zev Cohen and Associates, an engineering firm, come up, and they're going to talk about some examples from the past, and I'm going to step out for this one.
Great job, Jessica, and I'm really grateful that she spent the time in the numbers because she's very good at that. So let's talk about incentivizing economic development. And you know, we talked a little bit, and Bob did a great job of kind of going through what you've done in the past, you know, over the past several years with regard to this effort and the events that you've had. You know, one of the things that stuck out to me in the Destination Master Plan that you were talking about, 3 of the 5 recommendations related to economic development. And so the question is, how do you achieve those goals? One of the things that I think we often do a really good job as, you know, communities is we say, this is what we would like to be. This is how we would like to grow. This is how we want to develop into the future, both our job base and our communities and everything else. One of the things that we lag at is how do you then put all the tools in place to make sure that the ways in which we want to do things are the easiest, the most, you know, cost effective, you know, are perhaps incentivized to make sure that we're there to partner you know, with local governments and the private sector to, you know, develop in the ways that we, you know, that keep us as thriving communities. So we're going to talk through a handful of examples that we've worked on through the years, and you know, I think not every situation is exactly the same, but the key is creativity, I think, and creativity and having good partners. I'll talk about a lot of instances through this where we've partnered with the county, you know, and you know, partnered with the county and other jurisdictions, municipalities to, you know, accomplish some of these goals. So, Brown and Brown. This is a really good example of a partnership between Brown and Brown as a company, the County of Volusia, and the City of Daytona Beach. When Brown and Brown was looking to relocate the corporate headquarters, there was some discussion of other locations, other communities that were in the running for where this headquarters would be built, where the, you know, 600 to 800 employees would be located. Hyatt, having long roots here, was very, very focused on trying to bring it into the traditional core downtown area in Daytona. So we worked with the city and the county to establish essentially an economic development grant. I think it totaled about $9.5 million. But the focus was infrastructure. One of the points that you made, Bob, in your earlier discussion was infrastructure is a key to making things work. In this context, we were coming into a part of the city that still had some stormwater pipes that were made out of hollowed out palmetto logs. You know, obviously a really, really substandard infrastructure situation for, you know, something of this nature. What turned out to be, I think, a $65 or $70 million project that's really focused on revitalizing downtown. So what we were able to do, and I think this has been you'll see this theme repeated over and over in some of the things that we're talking about. You oftentimes will hear criticism when you're talking in the context of incentives of, well, you're giving away something. You're giving away, taxpayer dollars, to private entities. In almost every case that we'll talk about, the funding is actually the new tax revenue coming in from the project. And where those dollars are being directed is a directed investment in public infrastructure that benefits not only that project, but the area in general. And so here, we had telecommunications lines, stormwater, substantial stormwater improvements. And I think you want to talk a little bit about some of the stormwater challenges that we had here?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Chris Rowley with Zev Cohen. I'm a civil engineer with Zev Cohen, and we had the privilege to work on this project with Cobb Coal, Volusia County, and the city of Daytona. And when Brown & Brown came to us in 2017, we basically said this site's undevelopable. There's too many hurdles, and luckily we were able to partnership with the Cobb Coal and then the county and the city of Daytona to bring up these new upgrades, which included the sanitary sewer lift station was, I think, 50 years old. It was extremely old, not nearly big enough of what it needed to be. The stormwater pipes all ran through this site. It was an old car dealership, so basically everything from Ridgewood flowed through this site. We actually encountered one pipe, as Mark said, was completely collapsed underneath Beach Street that no one knew about, but we found it once they uncovered it. So that was one plus that we got there. In addition, it was a brownfield. So it was a brownfield, like we said, it was a former car dealership, and luckily there's a brownfield program that took care of half of it, but then the city and county stepped up to kind of help with the other half. Along with water lines, there was not nearly sufficient pressure in the area, which the city helped us fund connections, and then reclaim water. We were able to get money to bring reclaim to the site. So that, just to kind of spur off of what that has, paid dividends on already. Brown & Brown's a great example because we now have a 306 unit apartment complex that's going to be going just north of that. It's going to be breaking ground any day. There's a 286 unit apartment complex that's going right down the street. And then, of course, the $37 million that Hyatt has now invested into the park. And then along with the agreement was, just to add, that it was 600 new jobs, new high-paying jobs that would need to come as part of the new project.
Yeah, and so I think if you look at that agreement, and it's readily available, it's in the public record, but I think one of the interesting things about that is you can actually flip to the exhibits in that exhibit, or in that agreement, and track the infrastructure. The $9.5 million is fully accounted for, and actually we had to go back through and audit it after the fact to make sure that the costs that were incurred, the reimbursements, all this was set up as reimbursements, so it was after the fact being reimbursed by the city and the county, were all based on the costs incurred relating to infrastructure. Okay, Timberline. So this is one that's actually getting ready to move forward. We talk about sort of incentivizing the industrial base. This is a distribution hub. It's located just north of ISB, right around where the flyover for I-4 is, just, I guess, to the west of LPGA. And this is one where, again, utilities is going to be one of the keys. This is about 860 acres overall, roughly, somewhere in that ballpark. But one of the primary things that was needed was the sewer and water infrastructure. So Chris, you want to talk about what you're working on with that?
So that one's not actually our project, but I'm aware of it. So the water pressure basically out by the jail was very, very minimal. They've had issues out there for years, and in order for this to come online, they needed to extend I think it was a 14-inch water main of around 1,000 feet. And so the city partnered with this development to extend that line, which is going to bring in, I think, what was it? It was a $500 million annually in tax revenue.
Okay. All right. So, kind of continuing on, this is one that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. So the One Daytona site. This is another one that we were able to successfully work on with the county and the city of Daytona. How many of you remember this site in its initial iteration of development back in the 1960s? I wasn't here then, but but this was an Apollo era industrial facility that was developed by GE. And so the challenge that we had here, it was also a brownfield. It had some significant environmental contamination as well. But the challenge we had here was to redevelop it in a way that completely remade what it was. And so it wasn't just the cost of creating the new infrastructure, it was removing all the stuff that was old and didn't fit with what the evolving development pattern was. So I think all in all, we had approximately $56 to $58 million worth of infrastructure that was necessary before you started developing the site. And so if you've heard, again, this is, all in the public record. So what we did here was a little bit different. So we created a community development district because first and foremost, we wanted everything happening to be transparent. So we had a community development district that's a taxing district, it's a public entity, it's subject to the Sunshine Law and everything else. And that was the entity that entered into the agreements with the city and the county for the specific purpose of developing the infrastructure. So between the city and the county and the CDD, we've successfully, covered the $56 to $58 million worth of infrastructure. We had grants coming in from the county that totaled about $20 million that went to specific elements of the infrastructure in the project. And then here we did something that's a little bit different. You've heard about tax increment financing, and most of the time when you hear about that, it's in the context of, the CRAs and things of that nature. Here, we created one, and we created it by interlocal agreement between the CDD and the city of Daytona. So as long as we continue to have some home rule authority locally, this is one where we had the ability to do revenue sharing. So we have the new tax increment created by this project actually comes back to reimburse the infrastructure cost to the CDD and ultimately to the landowner who paid it over the course of 30 years. So Chris, you want to talk a little bit about just the total infrastructure that was put in here?
So the main thing was parking. Obviously, the parking was a big issue out there, and now there's the busing is no longer required as much. There's still the busing going on, but as you can see, there's that large parking field that's out in the back. Along with there was multiple stormwater pipes that ran through here that DOT worked with us to coordinate around. We do have that large pond in the back that is now getting partially filled for Costco, but we are offsetting that as well. So again, a great new project that's coming in as part of this incentive.
Yeah, actually, interesting thing in the context of the old infrastructure that existed here. Every utility line has an easement. When I was working through the plat and the title, work on this so that we could try and track all of those different easements through the property, I have 2 6-inch binders full of all the easement documentation and title documentation that affected this property as we were going into it. So it was an interesting effort, and certainly something that we couldn't do, without the partnerships that were in place. Chris, you want to talk about this one?
So this is a 40-acre tract over in Deltona, actually, and it's hard to see, but it's over there on the left side of the page. And what it is it's a single-family development. It's zoned residential, and it is in the middle of Deltona with no infrastructure around it. And we were working with the developer to see what we could do there, and basically we said you can do 1-acre lots and do septic service. That's all you can really do there. And we submitted our plans to the city of Deltona, and the city of Deltona came back to us and said, hey, we just built a new sewer treatment plant. We want new customers. We will cost participate on a force main to extend to your site and then also pick up all the commercial developments along the way. That way, when those commercial pieces come in, they also have central sewer. And so it was really a win-win for both. We were able to increase our unit count by over double, so they were getting double the amount of customers. Well, actually, they were getting 100% of the amount of customers because originally we were going septic, so they weren't getting any revenue from that. But then also we were able to pick up all of those commercial pieces along the way.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing here, given and I know the water quality issues are very important in this sector of the county. This location is just north of Lake Monroe, and all the lakes that you see are part of the flow to the south into Lake Monroe. Every developed lot that you see on this picture right now are on septic. So this is an area where building and retrofitting the community for to get into the central sewer system is a very important thing from a long-term environmental standpoint. Okay. I think now that brings us to Amazon. So this is, I'm sure a lot of you have heard, this is the large 5 or 6 story Amazon facility that's being constructed currently south of the airport. This is one where I think from a location standpoint, one of the keys was the existing infrastructure that was in place. The road network that was there, we had some back and forth with some of the folks in the neighborhood about roads, and I see a few people here that were in some of those meetings with us, but this is really, this entire sector has been planned for 40 years or more, right, George? I think 40 years or more for industrial development and to be an economic development and employment hub. The county's got a master plan for all of its holdings south of the airport. That's mostly what you see to the right of the picture here. And then the property going back to, I think it's Williamson that's over to the left, is all owned by various subsidiaries of NASCAR. But now this is all part of a very coordinated effort to implement master infrastructure. We've got some very specific state job money that came into this particular project, and I know that Team Volusia was instrumental in working with the developers and the Amazon team to bring that to bear. But infrastructure was the key here. The road capacity was there. We're right, we're within less than a mile of the I-95 and I-4 interchange. So that was one of the keys that brought this one into the area. Do you want to speak more on the infrastructure?
Yeah. So when this project came online, so basically this is Amazon's property is everything, where the parking lot is west, and the roadway that looks like it's going southeast, that's actually on the county's property, which is going to be the roadway that connects down to Bevel. When we first started the conceptual plan for this, there was going to be 2 connection points, one at Bellevue and one in Williamson. And this is as Mark said, it's a 2.7 million square foot facility. There's going to be a semi-truck once every 7 minutes, and the shift chains consists of around 500 people. So that's happening 3 times a day. There's 1,000 cars on the road coming in and out. So Amazon was very adamant about additional access, and luckily the county stepped up and helped us and said, hey, we have a master plan that shows a roadway basically coming right through here. Let's work together. You guys build the road for us. It helps us in the future. And so now that allowed them with 3 access points, and then also it allowed with, actually Amazon was able to get rid of one of their fire tanks because we were able to make a water connection to Bevel and interconnect all of the water lines in the area, which was a good cost savings to Amazon as well.
And I think the key, from a key standpoint, both this road infrastructure and that water infrastructure that's going in is going to be there for the next projects that come in on the county property or projects that come in on the NASCAR property to the west. So, all right. And I think this is, the master plan. So I was talking about the county master plan. Here's just kind of an image from that. So the Amazon facility is off to the left there, and that common roadway that's coming down to the signal that's already on Bevel is down in the kind of bottom left corner. So it really ties together nicely. I'll stay there for a second. I just want to mention 2 more just examples, to give you some additional things to think about. We talked a little bit about the Live Local Act earlier, and affordable housing has been a key community need for a long time. It's been one of the key issues that the county's been working on. I know all of the cities have various efforts working on that. One of the things, again, as long as we have home rule authority and have the ability to kind of be a little creative, we did actually successfully about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, did what Live Local now does. In fact, we kind of set that example and worked with the county and the city of Daytona to develop a mixed income project up on the Clyde Morris corridor that was, I think, roughly half market rate housing. Probably 1/4 of it is senior affordable, and the rest of it is family affordable. And what we essentially did was we negotiated an agreement with the city and the county to have a rebate of the taxes that were coming off of the family affordable units. So I think we worked it out, and the cost to the city and the county was something like $20 a month, over the period of 15 years to guarantee in our first phase of that project, it guaranteed 226 new affordable housing units for families in Volusia County. So that was an example of kind of creating that tax increment where we didn't have another, like a CRA or anything like that. So again, aligning our policies, our land use, and the tools that we've got there. And then if you ever want to see kind of how all of this comes together, anybody go to Gainesville on a regular basis? Okay, not many Gators in here, that's great. So I joke about this one because over the past 12 years, I've worked on a project up there called Celebration Point. And Celebration Point is kind of the example of, if you want to put every tool together on an economic development project, that's it. We've got user fees there. We've got tax increment financing that goes into that. We've got CDD financing that's gone into that with tax exempt bonds. I'm happy to talk about that one with any of you that may have an interest in it. But again, one of the most interesting things in that one is we did something called the Southwest Alachua Transit Improvement District. They really wanted to focus on creating a transit district and connecting it to the hospital and to the rest of Gainesville, to the campus. And so we've developed all the transit facilities in this new project that's west of I-75, right at Archer, including a new overpass that connects directly and creates a parallel to Archer going back to the university. And as part of our incentive, we created a tax increment. We get 25 to 30% of the new tax value to specifically finance those transit improvements over the period of 30 years. So again, appreciate the time. I'm probably getting the hook. The music's about to start playing, so I'll sit down, and we appreciate your time.
Perfect. Okay. So they are, the brains of the operation in terms of structuring these projects to work from a financial standpoint. My summary statement, and then we're going to turn it over to Bob really quick, is development is easy as long as you have time and money, right? And so all of the incentive approaches that we've seen today, target one of those two things, the time or the cost for development. And so as we look at planning Southeast Volusia and what can we do to incentivize economic development, a big thing we heard is utilities. What are the areas where extensions are planned but haven't come online yet? Are there local partnerships that you can do there, or partnerships with the development team to bring those forward in a reasonable manner? Transportation improvements. What are we missing? What connections do we want? How do we plan for those? Job creation. What are we targeting for high wages? What are we willing to provide in terms of incentive for that? I think we've seen over the past few years a shift from the traditional let's use the CRA tax increment to let's use some hybrid approaches for areas that maybe aren't blighted but are targeted for future development, that don't have that same kind of deadline for when CRAs expire. And so, specialty tax districts, all of these things that when you put it together, impact fee credits, tax rebates, all of those pieces come together to create a full picture. And the more that local governments can do on the front end to say, we know we have this problem, we are happy to partner with you, and here's what we can do. If you already have that plan, you are saving the development team months of planning to kind of get there and make the project work, which could be the difference between the project coming online and it not. And so we're happy to talk about other examples we've had in the past. We are 3 minutes over our time, so we apologize. Lawyers, what can you do? And we'll turn it over to Bob.
How about a round of applause? So as we move into our break, I just wanted to say, as we're trying to, what do we want to do next and how do we do it? We wanted to bring to you that we have to do it within the context of the legislation that has been passed. We're going to bring jobs here. We do have to have places for these people to live, but we have to do it carefully because the low-hanging fruit a lot of times in development is to just put up residential, and we're trying to figure out how to bring high-paying jobs to the area. While we have a lot to be proud of in Southeast Volusia for what we've accomplished in terms of jobs and industrial and commercial, the data and it, we probably need to work harder to be able to help extract from the data that we shared with you how we compare. But I think it shows that we have room for improvement, and that's really what we wanted to try to bring to you, and that the improvements that we make in bringing high-paying jobs and commercial industrial investment reduces the burden on our residents. And then lastly, well, okay, so we want to do that. What are the best practices? What are some good things that have been done before? How did it work? What were the benefits? And so that's what we wanted to share with you there. So we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then when we come back, County Manager George Rechtenwald is going to share some projects with us. So 10 minutes. Thank you. This has
I'm doing well, sir.
Good job. I'm Bob Williams. Take your seats so we can get started. I need a gavel up here. Let's see. Do we need to get George's presentation? So, obviously, we've talked about infrastructure being very critical, and we're very fortunate in Volusia County, and particularly in Southeast Volusia County, to have a great partnership with the county government. And so our county manager, George Rechtenwald, has agreed to share with us some of the highlights of things going on in Southeast Volusia. So, George?
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for inviting me to speak today. Bob has a great way of inviting you. He puts you on the agenda to speak, then he takes you to lunch and shows you, oh, by the way, I got you a good time slot, and then I'm like, what are you talking about? So, but I've been here before, and I do like coming to talk to this group. I think what you're doing is fantastic, and I'm happy that we're part of partnering down here. And you heard a little bit from the last speaker, who I cannot compete with, Mr. Watts, about some of the partnerships we've done, and kind of the county portion, if you notice, and these things has been infrastructure. It's a public purpose. And really, what you can see, and I've kind of seen this battle through the years developing, certain people would push against new infrastructure because they believe it may lead to sprawl. But the problem with what you have is we have a lot of old infrastructure that's not to code, doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and really, these are opportunities to upgrade our infrastructure, move us into the future, and it's this new infrastructure that we're putting in that is protecting the environment and our natural resources. It's the new infrastructure that is treating pollution, and again, it's allowing us to enjoy all these resources, and we do have the ability to bring in high-paying jobs and better living conditions because of that. So I think that that's important. A new road goes in, and sometimes people are upset about it, but the new road will have all the latest and greatest stormwater. Often I think we spend as much on the land and the stormwater systems for a road system as we do for the road itself. So I just wanted to point that out as we go through these. We've been active here for some time, and my utility director and Mike Ulrich here. That's why I like old technology. Just click it, yeah. We're used to it at the county, we make do. So go ahead and Okay. We have been a partner with the cities for some time. I was going to highlight here a little bit, we've worked quite a bit with Oak Hill. As many of you know, we have the utility that serves really from Edgewater to the unincorporated area and into Oak Hill. So we've been a partner with them for some time, and we work with your various strategic plans. And one of the things was a plan for Oak Hill was to get water and sewer down to their Halifax Avenue, center of town, and we're in the process of making that happen as we speak. So Mike and his team have worked extensively with them. And the other thing we took advantage of, and we'll talk a little bit about it, was we had to put together a reasonable assurance plan. It was that or be dictated on how we would clean the Mosquito Lagoon. Another great collaboration was put together with the county, the DOT, and the cities all here in the southeast. Worked together, put together that plan. That plan is being implemented, and we'll go over some of that as well. And part of that plan involves our utility. Other parts of it involve our stormwater team, and all of it's towards making sure the Mosquito Lagoon is improved. So, and the nice thing about that plan is it has measurable results. We are studying right now the amount of nitrogen that we're removing to help out the Mosquito Lagoon. First one, go ahead. One of the farthest along here is our Indian Harbor Estates sewer retrofit. This is a project where we were able to put in an affordable sewer system, and we've got the system in place, the base system, and I think they're still in the process of having residents connect. But you can see there's a measurable amount of nitrogen that we expect to get out of there. And these projects, again, it's all partnership driven, and our team goes, I think Mike and his team, one of the best around getting grants. We try to pull in the state, St. John's, every chance we can. Indian River Lagoon helped out with the design, and so we were able to cobble together and put this project together in an affordable fashion for the people that live there. Next. This is our kind of our biggest in the area. And, we do have our treatment facility down off Beacon Light Road. It has to be upgraded to advanced wastewater treatment. I will say we're proud of the fact that none of the treated water goes into a body of water. It's up on a hill. It's all put into county land that's supplied out there. We're going to double the capacity. That's important because as we move lines down towards Oak Hill and beyond, you have to have the capacity in the plant to treat it. So it doesn't do us a lot of good to run lines and not have that capacity. So that's kind of step one. And we've been, putting together the funding. The county council has helped us out with putting ARPA funding towards this, about $6 million. We've got another almost $6 million, $5.5 million in grants. We do expect the construction to be greater than that, so we're still hunting for money, but we expect to be on schedule with construction in 2024. So again, this is something that helps improve Mosquito Lagoon, and it gets us that capacity we need as we go forward. Now, there's a bunch of smaller projects. We're not going to go over them all, but again, we're constantly working in the utility, upgrading areas, adding the advanced treatment, doing extensions all the way down, getting the loop down towards the middle of Oak Hill. So again, these are all part of our plan to keep the Mosquito Lagoon clean, but it also will provide opportunities for economic growth because you're going to have the sewer lines in those areas. And I think that's been important. The plan itself, we talked a little bit about it. And I think we're going through a report right now for the annual compliance. Have we got through it yet, or are we still? Okay. All right. Just before kind of the hurricanes and all hit, kind of got overshadowed a little bit. One of our bigger projects was stormwater treatment of the Gabordi Canal. When they did the original studies, looking at the Mosquito Lagoon, stormwater was I think the biggest culprit. So we put a lot of the money into the stormwater treatment. We have a very modern series of ponds and treatment facilities to remove the nutrient. Again, we should be able to get rid of over 2.5 tons, almost 3 tons of nitrogen a year, and phosphorus around 1,100 pounds per year. Again, the same kind of approach we always take, find partners and put things together. We have $3.2 million that we put together through our stormwater fund and the other agencies. That project is complete and has been operating, and we're excited to have that one done, and that should help out. And kind of the twin, a little farther down, the Ariel Canal, similar idea. And that project is getting ready to be underway, and we are proud of that one. Next one, and one that you guys hear more about probably, are our road projects. We have several, and by the way, I'll say it now, I'll say it again. We're going to have the county road program meeting, the council in August. I think it would be the first meeting, but we'll get that solidified here shortly. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But what we have right now on tap for this area are a lot of it safety driven. So we have the Pioneer Trail, Sugar Mill intersection. We have paved shoulders, Turnbull Bay. Both those projects are right out for bid right now, so you should see construction activity pretty soon. And then we have Pioneer Trail and Tomoka Farms Road intersection. That's we're going to be putting a roundabout in that particular area. A series of bad accidents, and I think someone was killed. We received some state funding for that. And then another big safety project here is the Old Mission Road. We're shifting the road away from the canal. It's in its design right now. It's been very dangerous through the years, people going off into that canal. So we have the safety funds, and a good portion of it is being spent down here in the southeast area. So it was mentioned a while back earlier in the presentation about Williamson. So we worked very hard with the Utilities Commission. I think Mr. Bunch, they did a great job. We had kind of gone around in circles for several years, and then we finally got a good team on it. I will point out on this one, when you look at the one on the left, the Pioneer Trail to State Road 44 through the Utility Commission land, a lot of wetlands are in there, so that will be a challenge still, and it will be expensive. Then there's the section that was also mentioned. We worked with the developer, and a much easier process. We were able to get an alignment to the south, and you'll probably see sections of that before you'll see anything to the north, just because the nature of the building that's going out. I will point out, I'll give my little pitch as I do. Of course, the road program, when we talk about it, used to be a big deal. We'd have a room like this, be done at night. and we'd go over, you know, many, many projects. We now can fit it on a small index card. We don't have much of the road program that we used to. Reason is you've had 20% construction inflation. You've seen a road go from about $2 million a mile to now approaching $10 million a mile. So, and to give you an idea, you know, with our gas taxes, that just gives us, you know, between the money we need to run the roads and operate them, with gas taxes, I think you get about $25 million total. 20 of it is used in the maintenance and running of the roads, so it gives you $5 million for new capacity. So that and impact fees are what's driving the road program. And impact fees have to be spent in the zone of where they're collected, or maybe right up against the adjacent zone. So the issue you have is some areas of the county where you have near explosive growth, we are able to put together those impact fees and put together projects along the LPGA and Williamson area where you have a tremendous amount of growth occurring at one time, and then the impact fees come in at that time. If not, and they come in through a long period of time, well, then we don't have the money necessarily to put together any kind of project, especially at the inflation rate that we have. The state has helped us out a little with that too, in that they've capped what we can do for impact fees. So we have the road inflation going sky high, but we're not allowed to keep up with an impact fee. And people ask, how do we ever get behind to begin with? Well, it's because we've always had a reluctance to charge the right amount for impact fees. So I've seen the pendulum go back and forth in my career, but I think we about had it right a few years ago, and then we had this explosive cost increase, so we're just falling back behind again. So Mike, you know, just thought about that. Of course, we're going to have to come up with other ways, I think, to fund these projects. And I know it's a kind of a political hotbed, but you know, we are going to have to look at some things like sales taxes or other mechanisms in the future if we're going to get some of these projects done at the current rate of construction costs. So, any questions? Have we got anything? I usually get hooked off of here, so.
Well, and you've heard it a couple of times now, and so we have a tremendous opportunity for public-private partnerships, and you're seeing a really great example of it here, and so I'd like to invite Glenn Storch up to give us an update on his projects.
Well, thank you. First of all, it's not my projects. This is about the future, and what you're looking at oftentimes on a situation like this is two things. What I've heard today is jobs in Southeast Volusia and partnership. Those are the two issues that we're really looking at. And jobs is near and dear to me because I know, and Mark indicated I'm very old, because I am, because I remember when General Electric closed and you literally had an entire generation of kids lost because they had no place to work. They had to leave the area in order to find work. And so my goal was always to try to find some mechanism to increase jobs in this area so that our kids can stay here. That's important to me. And to be honest with you, I failed to some extent because both of my kids had to leave to the area to go find good jobs. So, and I know so many other people that had the same situation, but it's changing. It is changing now. And so the goal here is to do that. The second issue is partnership. Let's go to the next slide. So the partnership that I'm looking at right now, this is my client. The client has 70,000 acres of land all along I-95. And so you have basically 4 access points along there, 4 access points to I-95. Deering Parkway, which is 5A, and Maytown Road, both of those affect Oak Hill enormously. And that will be a partnership with Oak Hill as time goes on in Volusia County. Indian River Boulevard. That Indian River Boulevard interchange, 442, that goes directly into this. Edgewater is well ahead of this at this point. They've already been planning for the future. They're planning to start construction, as a matter of fact, within this coming year. And so Edgewater is indicated. State Road 44. The property goes all the way to State Road 44 now. And so that's some of the things we were talking about last time as to if we're going to do something, maybe New Smyrna would like to look at that area as a potential area for job creation. Because that's something we just recently acquired. We weren't really looking at doing anything with it because we were focusing on Edgewater, but that's something we should do that. So all of these things are tied to everyone in this room. Every single city, the county, and the key is partnership. And fortunately for me, fortunately for this area, this owner, which is Miami Corporation Management at this point, and their subsidiaries and sister corporations, this owner has always been about partnerships. They're not about development. They're about, they're landowners. Most of the land they acquired in 1925. And so, but they've been all about partnership and working together. So let's go to the next slide. So, as I say, the big track, the first track, it's 59,000 acres or so, was purchased in 1925. And so for literally almost 100 years, they have utilized this for silviculture, which is tree production, and agriculture, and just wanted to be left alone. Didn't want to have anything to do with anything else, but things changed as always. Next. Because as time goes on, things change. And what happened is that the timber mills that used to take all the timber and use it for paper production and everything else moved north. And as a result, the transportation cost from Volusia County to those mills increased to the point where it made it financially infeasible to continue that operation probably. And so you had Georgia Pacific, Union Pacific, all the other big timber companies sell out in Volusia County. And they sold out and they turned it into ranchettes. And ranchettes is the opposite of what you want for economic development, because all a ranchette does is it takes a 10, 20, 25 acre parcel and divide it up. And so every single one of those parcels are fenced, they're cleared, you put a house or a mobile home on it, you know, sometimes you'll see cars on blocks. I mean, it's nothing. And from an economic development standpoint, the land is so fragmented, you can never create something again, and you can never get economic development for that. And so, unfortunately, that's what I was requested to do years ago when we started this, because it had come to a point where they couldn't financially feasibly continue to do this. So I did this. I mean, this thing was totally subdivided out, dirt roads, because all the logging roads were done, the dirt roads were in there, and everything was ready to go, ready to sell. But they gave us a chance, and working with DCA, the board members, because they'd had this property for 100 years and it was a legacy to them, gave us a chance to look at something else. And the something else was this next one. This is what we created instead. And we worked with environmental organizations, we worked with Habitat, with Audubon of Florida, we worked with Volusia County, Brevard County, and we took this and we first of all planned the wildlife corridors, and were able to preserve those wildlife corridors as opposed to fragmenting them into ranchettes, and take those and put the wildlife corridors where they needed to be, which left the areas that were appropriate for sustainable development as part of our other plan. And then what you did is the DCA had a program called Rural Land Stewardship, and that was, if you'll put this land in conservation for free, we'll give you increased density and intensity in return. That way you're not losing anything, you're doing it more efficiently, you're creating economic development, and from the Brevard standpoint, you're also not losing tax revenues, because their real concern in Broward County, surprisingly, was if you put it into conservation, you lose tax revenues. So they were very concerned about those, and so we were able to work the deal out where these areas in the blue and tan were left for economic development and clustered, and in return, everything in green was put into a conservation easement. And that land is now in conservation easement and maintained and managed properly under a conservation plan. So that's how we did this. Cluster development, road shared use, 4 million square feet of job-producing use is required. We are actually required to create jobs. We have a job-to-housing ratio as part of this project. So everything is geared toward economic development and job production, as well as doing the right thing. Water conservation. This thing would have had thousands of individual wells and septic tanks on it, under ranchettes, thousands of them. And in return for what we did, we created two things. We created systematic plans for how to reduce the amount of water necessary, reduce the irrigation, require Florida-friendly vegetation, et cetera, and at the same time require everyone out there to have municipal water and sewer. So everything in Farmington now will have a single system, no wells and septic tanks, and as a result, our water usage, which is so important to economic development in this area, has been reduced by over 75%. I can't tell right there, but it's around 75% if I remember correctly. That is enormous. That's an enormous change just by government working together and by everyone creating that partnership. Next. So, part of this also, this is an overall plan. And what you don't realize initially is when we're looking at these things and creating things like trail systems, those trail systems are actually economic development generators. People want to live near trail systems. I was actually hired originally to stop any trail or road going through these areas. And after a while, we did research and we convinced the owners, and the owners understood this and became enthusiastic about it, that trails actually were economic developments for them. And that people would want to be near trails, and that you could then have those trails connected to other areas. And this is a picture, by the way, of Pat Northey. She is the queen of trails. She's the former county councilman. She's recovering now from surgery, so I hope you all wish her the best of luck in that. But she was the reason why a lot of these things took place, and now you have a trail across this entire area. Miles and miles of trails across this area because we all work together. In fact, when the owner changed and decided they wanted this, they were working with Tallahassee to the point where when the governor and cabinet signed this, they were there and holding up the newspaper. So this is the way you get things done, by working together. Next. The transportation system is obviously critical to this entire system. So not only do you have the north-south transportation system, which is, again, right now your transportation system is not exactly great because your north-south system is US 1 and 95. And that's really it to a large extent. This will actually create a bypass for 95. And that bypass for 95 will be an extension of Deering Park all the way from that 5A interchange up to Edgewater. And then now, because of working together with the county, that will now extend all the way and connect to Williamson. And by the way, the county was instrumental in helping design that. So it'll all work together, and you'll create an entire north-south system so that when things happen, like in New Smyrna, where the interstate got shut down because of a fire, and all of a sudden 95 could go nowhere, now we have alternatives. And so that's one of the things that's so important when you're trying to plan for these things. The east-west system, by the way, was the Maytown Road. Maytown will be a new interchange that's been in the works. It usually takes about 20 to 30 years to create a new interchange. We're about 15 years into it right now, and in the permitting process. Now, and that will provide a direct connection, I-4 to I-95, a new major east-west corridor. We already have the land and everything all set for it. Next. This is critical to this area in particular. So when George talked about the fact that getting together with the Utilities Commission and with the landowners to work out this alignment it is absolutely critical to this, to economic development in this area. So we really appreciate the Utilities Commission working with the county, I know they do, and finding that alignment that everyone could agree to. They had already, right now, Williamson is built all the way to Pioneer Trail. You now have the alignment from Pioneer Trail to 44 agreed to. You now have the alignment from 44 down to 442 agreed to. The alignment from 442 will start construction probably fairly soon, as a matter of fact. So we anticipate within a year or so that will start construction. So those things will happen. This is now being planned. This is now planned because of the fact we had partnerships with the county, with Edgewater, and everyone worked together. Next. At the same time, you have some issues. Right now, there's an issue as far as the 442 interchange. You have 4 lanes. This is not anybody's here fault. This is DOT's fault. You have 4 lanes going into 2 lanes under the interchange, and then going to 4 lanes. And it creates a bottleneck for some reason. I don't know why somebody didn't look at this before, but it creates a bottleneck for the ramp coming down and people now backing up on the ramp. So now we're working together with the county, with the city, and with DOT and with the TPO to try to rectify that and resolve that as well. And that's the way you get things done. Next. This is the plans that you're seeing for what's going on in Edgewater. This is Deering Park Center and Deering Park North. And this, as you notice here, this is not just residential. This is a lot of mixed use, because what we're hearing is the space industry is desperate to find places to go and to create job production. And they're looking for places, as you can imagine, easy access on 95, easy access, and which is created by 442, and those mixed use areas are all along 95. So the goal there, again, is to try to create that job production area at the same time creating residential that could live there close. So it's like living in a park, but at the same time having a very easy commute, bike, electric vehicle, et cetera. This is the way you should be looking at things. Live, work, and play in the same area to reduce traffic. Next. All right, so again, job production is the key. How are we doing this? This is what is called the Commercial Space Opportunity Overlay District. All right, so one of the things that they've done here is to try to create areas that they see as potential opportunities for the space industry. So you've got all of Deering Park North, you've got Deering Park Center, you've got some areas south, that's the Ford property there, and you've got, of course, the industrial park in Edgewater. Edgewater is really well equipped and really ready to go to try and take advantage of some of these things. But look at New Smyrna next. Oops, that's not New Smyrna. All right, we'll keep talking about Edgewater for a second then. All right, so this is one of the things we're doing in Edgewater. This is going to start soon. One of the things you're looking at from a residential standpoint is you're looking at different types of residential uses. So you need a diversity in residential uses in order to feed the economic development, in order to feed the job producers. If you don't have that, they will go somewhere else. One of the things that we've heard repeatedly is, do you have the people that could actually man our industrial or our office complexes? Is there a place for them to live? This is an ideal place to live if there's housing available. And so one of the things we're doing here is, this is an age-restricted community. This is over 55. You'd think that this is not really producing anything. It does. It produces economic development because these people go out there and they shop, they contribute, they volunteer. Age-restricted, or people over 55 or over 65 in some cases, are very vital people still, I hope. So, next, Mark. So, yeah, right. All right, Deering Park North. Now, Deering Park North, again, is you're looking at now creating a new community. And that will have a town center, a town square. This will be a new center for Edgewater as well. It will help create a new reason to come to Edgewater. And also, again, when people are looking at why they want to bring their factories, their office complex, their corporate headquarters, et cetera, they're looking at the area. They're looking at how they want to live. They're looking at what's available for them. Because oftentimes, it's the families that actually decide where these corporate entities go. It's, you know, the spouse of the president of the corporation that says, I'd love to live there. This is a great place. It has good schools, et cetera, et cetera. So all these things are important to provide as a reason for why people would want to come here. All right. We talked about appropriate densities for clustering development, preservation of natural resources. One of the things that's important about this one, for instance, is in the Farmington local plan, we preserved approximately 50,000 acres as part of this overall project. All right. In this one here, during Park North, we are preserving 3,700 acres as part of this simply by planning it correctly and doing the right thing and working with the city in doing that. Next. The trail system is important because, as you see, these trail systems right now are sort of disjointed. They don't combine. They don't work together. You've got a trail system in Edgewater, for instance, that basically ends at the interstate for no good reason. And so we've got to find some way of connecting these trail systems and connecting them with the New Smyrna trail systems, which, by the way, also don't have any real connection. And so you've got to find ways to plan for the entirety of this. And if Mark has indicated, if you have to have some kind of transportation district to make this happen, let's do that. Let's find a way. Because, again, these trails are another reason why people invest in an area. Next. We talked about that. Let's go to the next one. All right. So this is what I was talking about as far as New Smyrna. In New Smyrna, you have very limited areas in your space overlay and job-producing areas. The biggest area right now is the old FEC tract, and that's got its obviously some issues there. But other than that, you don't have a lot. And so when I saw the information that Jessica provided regarding the amount that New Smyrna has as far as residential versus non-residential tax base, that's something obviously New Smyrna wants to work on. And so last Economic Summit, if you recall, we looked at this as a whole. And one of the recommendations at that point was, let's put these things together. We have a piece of property in which a new road is going through. We have no residences in this area at this point. We have Williamson coming off of next to the interstate. We have Williamson at 44 right there at the interchange. Isn't that an ideal location to look at the idea of doing something as far as developing job producing? And so that was the Economic Development Summit's recommendation. This was taken to the city of New Smyrna Beach, is my understanding, to the commission. The commission included that as part of their vision and directed staff to work with the landowner. Again, I represent the landowner. They weren't looking at doing anything with this for probably the next decade, to be honest with you, because they had their hands full with Edgewater and everything we're doing there. But the city staff convinced us to work together with them, and now we're well in the process to creating something, I think, that will shave a year or years off the development process to get your corporate headquarters, to get your job producers investing in this area. So I want to congratulate the city and the staff on working toward that, and of course the landowner. Next. That's what we just talked about. And so that idea is to create job creation, corporate headquarters. It'll also create the trail systems. It'll create preservation areas contiguous to DPN. It'll also create potential for different types of housing that is affordable to allow for to allow people to live near where they work. And by the way, this is one of the things that I think is important to understand. Affordable housing is not just low-priced housing or subsidized housing. What you need to look at is how you can find a way to live. Housing is a certain cost. I mean, the cost of housing, the construction of housing is enormous, as George has probably indicated. But what you can do is you can lower the cost of living to allow for the price of housing, such as if people don't have to have cars, or if they don't have to drive their cars every day, if they don't have to pay for gas, if they can bicycle to work, if they can golf cart to work, that takes out an enormous cost for their living that allows them to subsidize housing. So there are ways to do this. If you're not commuting a half an hour, then you can save money. And interestingly, the millennials understand this. They love the idea of living close to work. They love the idea of living 5 miles, 5 minutes away, so they can walk or bicycle to work. We're the problem. So we were used to living wherever we wanted to and then driving to work. But things are changing and ideas are changing. Next. So that's the good planning. So this is the area we're talking about now and working with the City of New Smyrna Beach to expand the job-producing areas. And that shows the Williamson alignment. It's now been agreed to by the county and will be dedicated to the county soon. We'll have to look at the comprehensive plan presently on that because we still have the county designation even though it's in the city. And we'll look at zoning restrictions to make sure that it's done properly and it's the type of things that we can live with but the city wants to encourage. So those are the things we'll be working together on and to encourage non-residential investment to increase in this area. Next. That's it. So that's a 20-year history of a 70,000 acre parcel based on a 100-year history. Is there anything I can answer as far as any questions? Are we good? Are we good for a break? Yes? Part of that, yes. So just to let you know, the original base piece, the Farmington tract, was owned since 1925. They then, as time went on, they bought additional tracts. They bought additional corridors to allow for the connection to 5A. They bought corridors to allow the connection to Maytown. They bought the old Reflections property, which is now Deering Park Center. They bought the Restoration property when that came on the market. And then they bought the O'Reilly tract, which goes all the way to 44. Yes?
I did hear you reference affordable, you referenced peripherally affordable housing. But another question or another way to ask it might be, is there mixed price point housing?
Yes. First of all, Deering Park North and Deering Park Center will have both those things because you can't have a community with just one group. You have to have a community that allows for different folks. And in fact, there's different kinds of affordable housing. If, for instance, in Deering Park North, we have a process where 1/3 of the single-family homes allow for mother-in-law facilities, which are basically accessory units that can be rented out. 800, 900 square feet, but you have someone right there supervising it. So it's another way of providing housing in a way you deal with it. But you've got to, the best way is to look at clustering, finding ways to reduce other expenses, and basically allowing for a job base.
Okay, how about a round of applause for Glenn? Thank you very much. Now we want to move into the section where we hear from you. And so
Okay.
All right, I am back, but only because Kelly doesn't love public speaking yet. We're getting her there. So this next section is supposed to be interactive. So we've got some polling software that's going to use your cell phones. We're going to pull up a QR code here so that you can pull it up on your phone. You also have a paper printout of the questions themselves, but in order to get live results and kind of have a discussion, there will be live results if we pull it up on the phone. So we'd like to do that, and we're just getting it calibrated here.
Oh, looks like somebody voted already. Hold on one moment. Okay. Why don't we go ahead and and start.
Do we have the QR code for them to?
So the QR code, it should be on that little sheet of paper. Let me pull up the QR code for everybody here in case you don't have that piece of paper. Okay, so all you have to do is just scan the QR code if you have a smartphone. Should go right to the website. It should say Start Survey. If you have the app, you could also use the app. Type in DRCC.
And we're going to give everyone a minute.
Anybody
to get that up.
any questions? Need help? Okay.
Okay, if we all have it up or in the works, we can pull up just the first question. I see that we are already
Okay.
answering them, which is great. So the first question, and this will update live. Hopefully it's updating. You guys all agree with this, which is great. The first question is an agree or disagree, and it's encourage the Southeast Volusia cities to collaboratively establish industrial, commercial, future land use areas identified in the Southeast Volusia Regional Economic Development Plan and to work with those landowners on development. And so it's agree or disagree there. We'll give everybody a minute, but it looks like that is a clear answer.
Sorry, one second.
All right. We don't have any contrarians in the audience today, which is nice.
You know what? Hold on one second.
Sure.
Sorry about this. Looks like we're having some issues with this.
Yeah, I think everyone's 100%. Everyone changes they disagree to. So I think as we go through, there'll be other numbers. Okay. All right, I'm taking this as the software's working and we all agree. So we're going to play out the next few and make sure that the answers are all populating. So if we go on to the second one, it's encourage the Southeast Volusia cities to work with the appropriate partners like New Smyrna Beach Utilities Commission, the county, and others to develop plans to prioritize public infrastructure projects within industrial commercial zones and accelerate pad readiness of sites, also, shovel readiness. So we've got 100% agree here. We'll give it a good 10 seconds if we have anyone else who hasn't answered. And it looks like that one is also clear. And we're going to go through these and then we're going to talk about kind of how we implement these based on our feedback. So that one looks fantastic. It's exciting. All right, let's move on to number 3. We've got to disagree, so it's working. Encourage the Southeast Volusia cities to expedite job producing and industrial commercial development review processes that align with site selection trends and reduce timelines that result in the company being able to initiate operations and provide new high-paying jobs. We didn't do short questions for you guys. So we've got 98% agree, 2 disagree here. It was 3, so we've got more feedback. We've got a kind of overwhelming majority here that are in agreement for this. Love to hear, maybe after this on the why we disagree. There are, pros and cons to everything. But that looks like a pretty strong answer there. Right. Number 4 is agree, disagree, support a strategy to encourage attainable housing development that provides convenient commute opportunities to industrial commercial work locations. Again, unanimous here. This was on every item that we talked about.
I thought it was broken.
Yeah, it is fantastic. And I think that's probably why we're all in this room. So again, we got to disagree on this one. All right. Number 5. Support a strategy that considers incentives for attainable housing near industrial commercial work locations. Again, overwhelming, 98%. I think that 2% equals 1 person. There's one contrarian in the audience here. So that, again, is fantastic, and we can talk about kind of how we would implement that. Now, these next questions will have more of a spread. And so this 6, 7, and 8 will be first, second, and third priority. So remember your rankings. The first one is what's your first priority in advancing the Southeast Volusia Regional Economic Development Plan? We've got quite the spread here, and it's updating as we go. And so it looks like in first place is, comprehensive future infrastructure plans. We've heard a lot about that today. I think it makes sense. It's a really good target. We've got that adding in. So far for second is, identifying via adoption of future land use mapping, non-residential land uses. That's on the planning and getting ahead of what will come forward for us in the future. So I think those are a strong first and second. All right, we will go to number 7, which would be your second priority. You can see here we kind of caught everybody who didn't say comprehensive future infrastructure planning as number 1. And the 1 and 2 remain, the same in terms of priority. And then as the third, implementing the land development regulations. And so we really are seeing a natural progression on high-level planning, high-level needs analysis, and then how do we get those on the books? How do we make them work and bring projects forward, which is the land development regulations. And it's sneaking up to adding land development regulations for the comprehensive plan. So again, same logic there. So then we'll go on to number 8, which is just the third priority, see if anything shakes out, but I think we've probably got the same kind of target. Here we've got a spread. We've got affordable or attainable housing moving up a little bit here, so it's important. But again, that master planning kind of coming first. And it looks like everybody is kind of catching up on the overall planning. Right. So I think we can see the clear results there, which is fantastic. On number 9, if you would currently rank the balance of quality of life and available sustainable fair wage work in Volusia County, 1 being the worst and 10 being the best, unsurprising in most of these rankings, we have a lot of people who say, we're somewhere in the middle. I think we've got a good percent we've got a 3 come in, okay. So I think this is not your typical, is it a parabola? I haven't taken math in a long time. Shape of the strong and then coming down. We've got it kind of weighted on the closer to the worst. And so part of the discussion aspect of this will likely be, what can we do to improve that quality of life and the balance of attainable housing? So let's note that for future discussion, because I think the majority is 6 or below, which we want to beat. And then number 10 is just when considering environmentally sustainable development or resiliency, which term means the most to you? So when you talk about environmental sustainability, what do you rank highest? So far, we've got development with higher density and more open space, like Farmington, Deering Park, great example of that. Development that accelerates reclamation of effluent and stormwater from the areas that are currently being discharged into the Indian River. So reducing pollutant loads and nutrient loading, which is great. Development that encourages less trip miles and more walking, mixed use opportunities, internal capture. That is fantastic. And so the higher density and open space is really leading the day here. And then, stormwater strategies. So we talk a lot about low impact development. That might be something that would be worth exploring in terms of achieving that goal. And then the internal capture, which is what I'm going to summarize E as. And so we're going to make a note of this for 1, 2, and 3. And then I don't know if we have kind of a summary overall page on this, Kelly, or if we're just going to kind of shift into talking about it. Perfect. All right. So did everyone get a chance to answer, get the feedback in? This next part is where we kind of open it up to you guys. So we may want to pass the microphone around as we talk. But it's given the strong agreement that we have on most of those points and some of the strategies that we've seen, how do we move forward? What is the action plan for the next year? What measurable goals can Bob and Tracy move forward to see this happen? And we can open it up for feedback and then kind of do a summary at the end.
Hi, my suggestion is a follow-up meeting in each of the 3 cities and gather the utility companies that serve those cities. And in sitting down with them, ask them, each of the utilities have a capital plan. What is the capital plan for here for the UC, the Utilities Commission for New Smyrna Beach? Florida Power and Light, Edgewater, and Oak Hill. What are their capital plans? Where are they focusing their efforts? And then water and sewer, the county serves Oak Hill. Edgewater and New Smyrna Beach have their own water and sewer utilities. The UC here. So infrastructure shows up through the whole survey. The next step, I think, would be to follow up with the utilities.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Other comments and responses to strategy? Hear from any of our participants. Glenn? Yeah. I'll say if you want to use the table mic, perhaps.
One of the things you're always looking at is how to pay for some of this stuff. So you've got, as Mark's indicated, one of the strategies they've used is a CDD. And I don't think, we haven't used that a lot down here, but one of the key to a CDD is you're taxing yourself. It's taxed on the existing land and does not, in fact, create any obligation on the part of any city or county or any government. So those are things you're seeing more and more as a means of helping to fund some of these new infrastructure improvements that are necessary. A lot in Daytona, but less in Southeast Volusia. And I will tell you that Deering Park has one of the largest CDDs around, so about 62,000 acres, which is the Deering Stewardship District. And that'll help a lot as far as helping to fund some of the infrastructure.
Sure. So exploration of special districts, that's good. Any other general comments before I have a question before we kind of get into analysis? No? Okay. For those elected officials in the room, this is noticed as a public meeting, right? You can talk, you can chat. We've got microphones on the tables. Or anyone in the audience, what hesitations or roadblocks do we see in implementing these strategies that we have highlighted? It seems like everyone's in agreement, so why aren't they already in the books? What do we need to help with to kind of get that through that next step? Yeah, Jake?
Yeah, you don't have the people that don't want development here. We're all pro-development, so we need to do a good job of educating the public, the anti-development people, or the people that think they're anti-development because they don't understand. Glenn brings up a good story with Farmington. I've talked to many people who don't understand that the increased density resulted in increased conservation. All they see is increased density, and they don't have the whole picture. Mm-hmm. So I think governments and V-cards and everybody else needs to do a great job of taking the politics out of the conversation and talking facts. I thought that briefing that Glenn gave was a great way to get that point across. Sure. And there's other projects. That was just the one we heard today.
Absolutely, I agree. All right. Any others? Potential challenges, roadblocks, things to overcome? Yes. We can run the microphone back.
This isn't a capital item, but more of a maintenance item, but we had historic flooding in Southeast Volusia with the 2 hurricanes. And I hear from a lot of people that are still upset by the stormwater flooding that we had last fall, and that's an anti-growth sentiment. And so that has to be addressed, maybe as simple as cleaning Edgewater Canal, Garbodi Canal, et cetera.
Got it. All right. Any other comments there on that topic? Okay. Well, so we'll do my best impression of a summary here and potential next steps, and then we'll open it up to any questions you had about anything that we heard today before we wrap up. And so I think we've touched on important points on roadblocks and feedback. And I think that with everyone here in the room today, we have the opportunity to do something really amazing. And so action plans, the 100% agree items, 1 and 2s, well, 2 we had a 2% disagree, but an overwhelming majority of you agree on all of the questions that we presented today. And so the question is, how do we implement that? If each of the cities here today went back and at your next council or commission meeting, you directed staff to collaborate with Southeast Volusia Chamber and V-Card and these other municipalities to put together some comprehensive plan policies to implement what we talked about today. How do you expand the future land use development opportunities? What facilities in our city do we want to target in our comprehensive plan as being upgraded first? Working with engineering and utilities to get that list together. How do we expand on the overlay that all of you adopted and supported to outline the incentives that you are comfortable with, whether it is tax abatements, whether it is specialty district partnerships, whether it is impact fees or cost sharing. If you want to target one specific improvement and say the city is willing to partner 50% of the costs on this, and we'll start setting aside fees to target that. Having a discussion with your staff on what levels of incentives that you would like to adopt, what's available, given the menu based on job creation or cost for improvements, so that when a potential developer comes in, they don't have to kind of create the menu, although it's possible they can. You guys, gaining a familiarity with the tools out there and saying, we'd love to implement this, this, and this, because we think it fits best for our community. While I think you guys have done a fantastic job of having a united front on this issue, and as a Southeast Volusia region, there's the opportunity for each city to kind of implement the tools that they think fit best for your city, and so those different approaches might shake out. I do think, working with, again, engineering utilities, getting a list of target infrastructure for the overlay district, based on the areas that you designated. Is there water? Is there sewer? Is there reclaim? What projects need to come forward to help development there, and again, get that pad readiness? What road projects do you want to see in that area to support the increased traffic? All of those things could be pulled together. On the others, just on the rankings, again, we've talked about future land use mapping for non-residential land uses. We saw in some of the charts that you're not behind there. You've got the kind of same breakdown, so it might be visiting those areas and seeing, if we have them, what's stopping them from being developed now? If these are the areas we've targeted for this type of growth, why the pause? Why do we still have that distribution on our taxable value and not the land use distribution that we would like to see? And how do we move that forward? Are there changes we need to make? Do we need to have some flexibility in design there? And then I think the other ranking is, really focusing on the commercial space opportunity overlay zones. Are there uses that, need to be added there to allow that to move forward? Are there other areas to expand to kind of create a commercial space hub and then expand from there with the kind of mixed use development that you guys would like to see? On the resiliency effort, is there a way to look at regional stormwater improvements to handle, public concerns recently, or, overall maintenance? And so those are all items that I say are pretty easy. I know they take a lot. And it starts with leaders of these cities going back and saying, we had this discussion, we've been doing this since 2018. The next step for this year should be, this picture. So Bob, you want to come up?
Yeah, if I can mention one more thing. I think Mark's point regarding stormwater is absolutely critical. We've had a lot of people who are concerned about stormwater since the hurricane. As you can imagine, I was flooded. And stormwater is a regional issue because these canals go through different jurisdictions. And in fact, people are affected differently by the way their stormwater area has been maintained. So we need to look at where we have Volusia County, Edgewater, Oak Hill, and New Smyrna working together to make sure the entire regional stormwater system works, because that's part of economic development. No one wants to come into invest in an area that has an issue with flooding, if that's the case. So let's start working together on that.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Glenn. Yes.
Yeah, if I can give a quick shout out to especially City of New Smyrna Beach, as you talk about the stormwater and some of those same concerns, and I think we all hear it from the residents, and sometimes using that as a vehicle or an excuse to try to either slow or stop development because they found a community that nobody else should live here with them. New Smyrna Beach recently, for those that you don't know, is they recently conducted a study there after the storm, Hurricane Ian. And so I had an opportunity to sit in and listen to it, and I believe it's on available on YouTube, so I'd encourage everyone to go back and listen to it. But some of the key points that I took away from that is they went back and not only did they look at their current capacity and conveyance system, But they also went back and they looked at, and they took two of their larger developments, Venetia Bay as well as Coastal Woods. And so they ran the model, and it was a completely neutral consultant, Jones Edmond, am I saying that right, or Edmond Jones, Jones Edmond, which also did the reasonable assurance plan that we heard about tonight. So anyhow, so they looked at the current developments. Had they not been developed, would that had any different effect on the stormwater? And their conclusion was it wouldn't. And what's interesting is they also shared is with 99 years ago, almost 100 years, about 99 years ago, they had a similar extraordinary event. And it took much longer for the water to recede than this event here. So their summary was their conveyance system is working. It only has a capacity of so much. And then they also recognized City of New Smyrna Beach of having one of the lead standards going forward that they adopted about a year ago, where most communities have a 1-to-1 cup. So it's essentially every square foot of impervious surface, they have to have so much capacity. New Smyrna Beach has gone a step further at 1.5 versus a 1-to-1 cup, and that's kind of the lead in the state. And that's something that I think Southeast Volusia can consider as a region, is to try to model those similar stormwater. Another area that, I extrapolated from it as well is every property has what they call pass-through stormwater as well. And they also talked about maybe an opportunity to go back and look at being able to capture some of that pass-through that outfalls somewhere else based on their project. So if you hadn't had a chance, go back, pull up that YouTube, and it was a very concise study, and certainly commend regional partners there of being able to take that step further. So.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. I mean, that's a good point. I commend the City of New Smyrna Beach for using the science to really figure out what happened and then look at what needs to happen going forward. So, I want to thank all of the elected officials, staff, and I think Councilman Johansson mentioned that we don't necessarily have all the naysayers here with us today. So the question is, how can the Chamber of Commerce help in getting the message out? And not that we're ever going to convince 100% of the people, but if there are reasonable people that just are not informed on these issues, how can we engage and help get them on the bus? And so, you don't have to answer that right now, but I want you to know that the Chamber, this is the Southeast Volusia Chamber of Commerce. We are here for you and to serve in that regard. So as we wrap up, I definitely want to thank the City of Oak Hill, Edgewater, New Smyrna, our friends at the County of Volusia, and I also want to thank our sponsors, the CEO Business Alliance, Team Volusia, the New Smyrna Board of Realtors, LTG, Lassiter Transportation Group, Deering Park, and Advent Health. Thank you all very much for coming. How about a round of applause for all of our presenters? We stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Kudos for that. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, well, thank you for attending.